I am Corporal Michael Reeves, call sign Havoc. MACV-SOG, Military Assistance Command, Vietnam, Studies and Observations Group. That's the censored name. The real description was simpler. If military stories interest you, subscribe to the channel. We were the men who carried out missions that never officially happened in countries where we were never officially present. Cambodia, Laos, North Vietnam. Anywhere the higher-ups needed eyes on the ground or wanted to take out targets, but couldn't admit American forces were operating there. We were ghosts. Our missions were classified as top secret. Our casualties never made it into the official records. And RT Python, Recon Team Python, my team, none of us will ever be in any history books. My team, RT Python, consisted of 6 men. Myself as team leader. Sergeant First Class James Doc Harrison, our medic and the oldest guy on the team at 32, which was ancient for SOG. 2 specialists who handled comms and heavy weapons, Marcus Webb and Tyler Chen. And 2 Montagnard indigenous fighters, Nut and Xor. The Yards were the backbone of SOG operations. Mountain tribesmen who knew the jungle like Americans knew city streets. Fierce fighters, absolutely loyal, and terrifyingly effective at silent killing. Nod had been with SOG for 4 years. Had more confirmed kills than the rest of us combined. Xor was younger, only 19, but he could track through jungles so dense you couldn't see 5 feet in any direction. We got the mission brief on March 12th at our forward operating base near the border. A standard recon patrol, or as standard as anything, was in SOG. Intelligence had identified a major supply depot approximately 15 kilometers inside Cambodia. Our job: infiltrate, observe, photograph, count the supplies, identify any high-value personnel, and extract. No contact if possible. This was pure reconnaissance. Getting quiet, get the intel, get out clean. They estimated 72 hours for the full mission. Insert by helicopter at dusk, overland movement to target, 24 hours of observation, then move to an extraction LZ 20 clicks south. Simple. Routine. We'd done a dozen missions like it. The insertion went perfectly. The Huey dropped us in a clearing just before sunset, rotor wash flattening the elephant grass as we fast roped down. The chopper was gone in 30 seconds, and suddenly we were alone in the jungle. The silence after a helicopter leaves is always profound. Your ears ring from the engine noise, and then it's just you and the jungle sounds. Birds, insects, monkeys in the canopy. The omnipresent white noise of the rainforest. We moved out immediately, Xor on point, navigating by compass and instinct. The jungle this deep in Cambodia was primary rainforest, never logged, never cleared. Trees rose 200 feet overhead, their canopies so thick that even at midday it was twilight at ground level. Everything was green and wet and alive. Vines thick as your arm hung everywhere. Bamboo groves so dense you had to cut through them. And the heat. God, the heat. Even with the sun going down, it was 95 degrees with humidity you could swim through. Within minutes we were soaked with sweat, our camouflage uniforms clinging to our bodies. We made good time the first few hours. The terrain was challenging but not impossible. Xor found game trails that headed roughly in our direction, and we followed them, moving in tactical silence. Hand signals only. Weapons ready. Every sense alert for signs of enemy presence. The NVA used this area heavily, and running into a patrol would compromise the mission. Worse, it could get us killed. 6 men, even 6 SOG operators, couldn't fight their way through the numbers the NVA could bring to bear this deep in their territory. Around 2,100 hours, about 4 hours into the patrol, Xor stopped, held up his fist. Everyone froze. I moved forward to his position, and he pointed at the ground. Boot prints. Fresh, maybe a few hours old. 5 or 6 men, heading east to west, perpendicular to our route. NVA regulars by the look of the prints, Chinese-made boots. Probably a patrol from the supply depot we were heading toward. We waited 30 minutes, listening, watching, making sure they weren't circling back. Then we continued, adjusting our route to avoid intersecting their patrol path again. That's when things started feeling wrong. I can't describe it better than that. Just a feeling. The jungle seemed different. The sounds were off. Not absent, not louder, just wrong somehow. The bird calls didn't match species I knew. The insects sounded like they were out of sync. And the light. Even with night vision, even in the darkness, the quality of light seemed strange. Colors that shouldn't exist in a jungle at night. Purples and deep blues that had no source. Havoc, Doc whispered, moving up beside me. You feel that? Yeah, I said quietly. Something's off. Can't pin it. The air, he said. It tastes different. Metallic. Like before a lightning storm. He was right. There was an electric quality to the atmosphere. A charge that made the hair on my arms stand up. But there was no storm. The sky above the canopy was clear, stars visible through gaps in the leaves. No clouds, no wind, no explanation for the sensation. Webb checked his compass. Frowned. Tapped it. Checked again. Havoc, compass is acting weird. Needles spinning. Can't get a solid bearing. I checked mine. Same thing. The needle was rotating slowly, not pointing north, not pointing anywhere consistently. Just drifting in lazy circles like it couldn't decide where magnetic north was. That was impossible. Compasses don't just stop working. Even near magnetic anomalies, they point somewhere. They don't spin aimlessly. Radio check, I ordered quietly. Chin pulled out the PRC-25, extended the antenna, tried to raise our forward operating base. Static. Pure white noise. He adjusted frequencies, tried different channels. Nothing. Just static on every frequency. No friendly comms, no enemy intercepts, nothing. It was like we were broadcasting into a void. Equipment failure? Webb suggested. Maybe we got hit with some kind of electromagnetic pulse? From what? Doc countered. There's no Soviet tech out here that could do that. And it wouldn't affect mechanical compasses anyway. Those are just magnetized needles. No electronics to fry. Nod appeared silently beside us. The Montagnard's face was tense, worried. Tuan Havoc, he said quietly, using the Vietnamese honorific for sergeant. Bad place. We should leave. Go different way. Why? I asked. What do you sense? Old stories, Not said. My grandfather's grandfather spoke of places like this, where spirits live, where time is broken, where men go and never return, or return old, or return young, or return mad. He shook his head. We should not be here. I trusted Nut's instincts. The Yards knew this land in ways we never could. Their ancestors had lived and died in these jungles for thousands of years. If their folklore said avoid certain places, there was usually a good reason. But we had a mission. We had orders. And turning back because of superstition and some weird equipment malfunctions wasn't something I could justify to command. We continue, I decided. But we stay alert. Anything else feels wrong, we reassess. Understood. Everyone nodded, but I could see the tension. Even the Americans, who didn't know the local legends, could feel something was off. We moved forward, slower now, more cautious. Every shadow seemed deeper. Every sound seemed to come from the wrong direction. And that metallic taste in the air grew stronger. We'd been moving for another 30 minutes when Xor, who was still on point about 20 meters ahead, suddenly disappeared. Not stepped behind a tree. Not moved out of sight. Disappeared. One moment I could see his silhouette in my night vision. The next, he was gone. Like someone had turned off his light switch. Xor. I hissed as loud as I dared. No response. I hand-signaled the team to halt, then moved forward to where I'd last seen him. The jungle floor was undisturbed. No signs of a struggle. No blood. No indication that anything had happened. But Soar was gone. Then I heard his voice. Behind me. Tuan Havoc? I spun around. Soar was standing there, exactly where I was, looking confused. But I'd just come from that direction. He hadn't been there 5 seconds ago. I'd walked right through the spot where he was now standing. Where did you go? I demanded quietly. Go? Soar looked genuinely puzzled. I did not go anywhere. You disappeared. I turned around and you were gone. All of you. Then you were back. We didn't go anywhere, I said. You disappeared. Vanished right in front of us. The rest of the team caught up. Everyone was on edge now, weapons up, scanning for threats. But there was nothing to shoot at. Nothing visible. Just the jungle and the wrong feeling and equipment that didn't work. We need to mark our position, Doc said. Set up some kind of reference point so we know if this happens again. Good idea. Webb pulled out a red lens flashlight, tied it to a tree at chest height, pointed in the direction we were heading. Now we had a reference. A way to orient ourselves if things got weird again. We moved forward, keeping the red light in sight behind us as long as possible. The jungle changed. Subtly at first, then more dramatically. The trees were different species. The undergrowth shifted from ferns to something else, something I didn't recognize. And the sounds. God, the sounds. They were wrong. Not jungle sounds anymore. Mechanical sounds. Rhythmic. Like industrial machinery. But there was no machinery out here. No power. No civilization. Just jungle for 100 miles in every direction. Then we saw the light. Not our red marker. This was different. White, bright, artificial. Coming from ahead of us, through the trees. We approached carefully, weapons ready, moving from cover to cover. As we got closer, the mechanical sounds grew louder. And we started to hear voices. English. American English. Shouting orders. Sounds of construction. We crept to the edge of a clearing and stared in disbelief. It was a military base. American military. Quonset huts, radio towers, vehicle parks, the whole infrastructure of a forward operating base. Except it shouldn't be here. We were 15 clicks inside Cambodia. American ground forces weren't supposed to be operating here. That was the whole point of SOG. We were deniable. And this base wasn't deniable. It was huge, permanent looking, with maybe 200 soldiers moving around. But something was wrong with the base too. The vehicles were wrong. The equipment was wrong. The uniforms were wrong. I'd been in Vietnam for 18 months. I knew what American deer looked like in 1970. This wasn't it. The uniforms were older style, World War II era. The vehicles were old jeeps and trucks from the 40s. And the weapons. The soldiers were carrying M1 Garyan's and Thompson submachine guns. Equipment that hadn't been standard issue for 25 years. What the fuck? Webb whispered beside me. Is this some kind of training exercise? Historical reenactment? In Cambodia? Chen hissed. During an actual war? That makes no sense. Doc was staring at the base with an expression of dawning horror. Look at the insignia, he said quietly. On the vehicles. On the flags. I looked. 6th Army Air Force. Flying Tigers insignia. Unit designations I'd only seen in history books. This wasn't a reenactment. This was impossible. The Flying Tigers operated in China during World War II. They'd been disbanded in 1945, and they'd never been in Cambodia, never been in Southeast Asia except China and Burma. We need to get closer, I said. Get photos. Intel will want documentation of this. Are you insane? Webb said. Havoc, whatever this is, we need to extract. Report it. Let someone else figure it out. Report what? I countered. That we found an American base from 1943 operating in Cambodia in 1970? They'll Section 8 us. We need proof. Against my better judgment, I was making the decision. We were going in. We were going to document this. Because nothing about it made sense, and sense was something I desperately needed. Some kind of rational explanation for what we were seeing. We circled the base, looking for a way in. The perimeter was guarded, but not heavily. The soldiers we observed seemed relaxed, not expecting trouble. Why would they? In their reality, whatever reality this was, they probably weren't in enemy territory. We found a section of fence line between guard posts and slipped through. Inside the base, everything was wrong on a level that made my brain hurt. The equipment was real. The soldiers were real. But they shouldn't exist. Couldn't exist. We moved through shadows between buildings, observing, trying to understand. Doc got photos with his pocket camera, the flash disabled, using available light. We needed evidence. Needed something to prove we weren't all having the same hallucination. That's when we heard the scream. From the other side of the camp, a man's voice, terrified, cut off suddenly. The soldiers in the base reacted, running toward the sound, weapons at ready. We followed at a distance, using the commotion as cover. What we saw when we got there froze us in place. A soldier, American, World War II uniform, was suspended in midair, 3 feet off the ground. But he wasn't floating. He was stuck, like he'd stepped into invisible amber. His face was frozen in an expression of terror. His mouth open in a scream that wasn't making sound. And he was flickering, like a bad television signal. One moment solid, the next translucent, the next gone, then back again. The other soldiers were trying to pull him down, but their hands passed through him during the translucent phases. During the solid phases, they couldn't move him. He was locked in place by something invisible. Something that was making him phase in and out of existence. Then he aged, right in front of us. His face, frozen in that scream, began to wrinkle. Hair went gray then white. Skin sagged. Decades of aging happening in seconds. The soldiers backed away in horror. And then the man was gone. Not dead. Not fallen. Just gone. Ceased to exist. The space where he'd been was empty. And the soldiers were left staring at nothing, trying to process what they'd witnessed. We need to leave, not whispered urgently. Now, before it takes us too. For once, I completely agreed. Whatever this place was, whatever was happening here, we needed to get out. We backed away slowly, retracing our steps toward the fence line. The base soldiers were in chaos now, officers shouting orders, men running in all directions. No one was paying attention to perimeter security. We made it to the fence, slipped through, started moving back toward where we'd entered this wrong zone. Except the jungle wasn't the same. It had changed again. The trees were different, larger, older, like we'd gone centuries forward or backward, and the red light marker we'd left was gone. No trace of the tree we'd tied it to. The jungle geography had completely shifted. Which way? Chen asked, panic creeping into his voice. I checked my compass. Still spinning. Useless. The stars overhead were visible through the canopy, but their positions were wrong. Constellations I didn't recognize. Like the night sky itself had changed. We stick together, I said firmly. We pick a direction and we move. Staying here isn't an option. We chose what felt like south, the direction we'd originally been heading. Started moving through this changed jungle. And that's when we heard the other voices. More English. But modern English. American accents from our time. Calling for help. Screaming. Coming from multiple directions at once. The voices were coming from everywhere and nowhere. American soldiers calling out grid coordinates that didn't exist on our maps. Radio chatter from units that hadn't been activated yet or had been disbanded decades ago. And screaming. Always the screaming. Men dying in battles that had already happened or hadn't happened yet or were happening right now in some other layer of time. Contact front, someone yelled in the darkness ahead of us. Modern accent, modern terminology. Then the sound of M16s firing. Full auto. The distinctive crack of AK-47s returning fire. A firefight happening somewhere close, but we couldn't see muzzle flashes. Couldn't see anything except trees and shadows and that wrong quality of light. We moved toward the sound, instinct overriding common sense. Soldiers in trouble. You don't abandon them. You move to support. That's the code. But as we got closer, the sounds began to phase in and out. One moment loud and clear, the next distant and muffled, like listening underwater. The firefight was happening, but it was happening in a different time. A different layer of reality overlapping with ours. Then we saw them. Soldiers. Americans. Materializing out of the jungle like ghosts becoming solid. 6 men in modern camouflage, carrying M16s and M60 machine guns. They were running toward us, terror on their faces, firing behind them at something we couldn't see. One of them spotted us, changed direction, headed straight for our position. They're everywhere, the soldier screamed as he got closer. Can't stop them. They just keep coming. Different times. Different, he flickered. Like the soldier at the base. One moment solid, the next translucent. He stumbled, tried to keep running, but he was phasing faster now. Solid, translucent, gone, back, gone. His squad mates were doing the same. All 6 of them flickering like dying light bulbs. Grab them. I shouted to my team. Try to stabilize them. We rushed forward, reached for the nearest soldier. During his solid phase, I got hands on his gear, tried to pull him toward us. But the moment he started flickering again, my hands passed through him. He wasn't fully in our reality. He was stuck between times, oscillating between existence and non-existence. When are you from? Doc shouted at the soldier. What year? 1968, the man gasped during a solid phase. Tet offensive. We were in Hugh City and then, he flickered gone. Back. Jungle and nothing makes sense and, gone. 30 years I've been trapped here. Or 30 minutes. Or both. Time doesn't, gone again. 2 years ago from our perspective. But he said 30 years trapped here. That wasn't possible. Except we were watching it happen. Watching a man exist in multiple time frames simultaneously. Watching cause and effect become meaningless. The soldier and his squad mates began to fade completely. Not flickering anymore. Just fading. Becoming more and more translucent until they were ghosts. Then outlines. Then nothing. Gone back to whatever temporal layer they'd come from. Or forward to one we hadn't reached yet. The jungle was silent again. Just us and the wrong sounds and the impossible physics. This is fucked, Webb said flatly. Havoc, this is beyond fucked. We need to abort. Find the edge of this zone and get out. Which direction? I demanded. We have no compass. No stars we recognize. No reference points. We could walk for days and still be inside this thing. Xor was examining the ground where the soldiers had been. Blood, he said quietly, pointing. Fresh blood, but also old blood. Same blood in different states. This spot, many men have died here. Different times. All at once. He was right. The ground showed overlapping evidence. Fresh blood that was still wet. Dried blood from days or weeks ago. And something darker, older, decomposed into the soil. Multiple deaths in the same location across different time frames. Like the ground itself was cursed. A nexus point where time collapsed. Temporal convergence point, Jin said, and we all looked at him. The kid had a degree in physics from Berkeley before he'd enlisted. Smart as hell. In theory, if space-time can be warped by gravity, maybe it can be warped by other forces. Create zones where multiple time frames exist simultaneously, where past, present, and future overlap. That's science fiction, Webb countered. We just watched men from 1968 phase in and out of existence, Chin shot back. We saw a World War II base operating in 1970 Cambodia. We're living science fiction right now. The question isn't whether it's possible. The question is what caused it and how we escape it. Not spoke up. The spirits. They guard this place. Keep people trapped. My grandfather said the only way out is to find the center. The heart of the wrong place. Where time began to break. Face what guards it and earn passage. Spirits don't create temporal anomalies, Chin said. Maybe spirits are just one culture's way of describing phenomena they don't have science to explain, Doc suggested. Advanced technology, natural anomalies, whatever. The point is, local folklore says there's a center, a source, and if we find it, maybe we find a way out. It was thin logic, based on superstition and folklore and the desperate hope that there was some kind of logic to this place. But it was the only plan we had. Stay here and eventually we'd phase out like those soldiers. Or age to death in seconds like that man at the base. Or just cease to exist. Moving toward the center, whatever that meant, at least gave us direction. Purpose. How do we find the center? I asked not. He closed his eyes, seemed to be feeling for something. The pole, he said. There is always a pull toward the heart of cursed places. You feel it in your bones, in your blood, the way salmon feel the river source. We follow the pull. I didn't feel any pull, didn't sense any direction calling me, but Nod did. And Tsor nodded agreement. The Montagnards felt something we didn't, some instinct or sensitivity that Americans lacked. So we followed them. Let them lead us deeper into the temporal distortion zone, toward whatever lay at its heart. The jungle continued to change as we moved. Sometimes we'd walk through areas that looked normal, identical to the Cambodian rainforest we'd inserted into. Then we'd cross an invisible threshold and suddenly the trees would be different. The undergrowth would shift. The very quality of air would alter. Like walking through rooms in a house, each decorated in a different era. We passed through what looked like ancient jungle. Trees so massive and old they might have been growing since before humans walked upright. Then through a burned section, everything charred and dead, still smoldering from fires that might have burned yesterday or 1,000 years ago. Then through jungle so thick and green it seemed primeval, untouched by anything human. And we found evidence everywhere. Signs that others had been trapped here. Dog tags from different wars hung on branches. World War II, Korea, Vietnam. Even tags from wars that hadn't happened yet, according to our 1970 perspective. Dates in the 1980s, the 1990s, the 2000s. Soldiers from the future, trapped here just like soldiers from the past. Equipment littered the ground in places. M1 Garons mixed with M16s mixed with weapons I didn't recognize. Futuristic-looking rifles with optics and attachments that hadn't been invented yet. All scattered and rusted and abandoned by men who'd either escaped or died or ceased to exist. We found bodies too. Some fresh, some skeletal. Some in states of decay that didn't match their uniforms or equipment. A soldier in pristine 1940s uniform, dead for maybe a few hours. Another in modern fatigues, decomposed to bones despite his gear looking brand new. Time didn't correlate with physical decay here. Death happened in whatever time frame it chose. Look at this, Doc called out. He was examining a small clearing. Multiple campsites were overlapping in the same space. Fire rings from different eras in the exact same spot. Modern MRE wrappers mixed with World War II ration cans mixed with things that looked like future rations in packaging that didn't exist yet. Men have been camping here for decades, or centuries. All in the same location because it's safe somehow. A stable point in the temporal chaos. Should we stop? Webb asked. Set up defensive position? Wait for the anomaly to end. It's not going to end, Chen said grimly. This isn't a temporal event. It's a temporal geography. A place where time is permanently broken. We don't wait it out. We either find the center and hopefully a way out, or we die here. Maybe in the past. Maybe in the future. Maybe in multiple time frames at once. We moved on. The pull that Nut felt was getting stronger. He and Soar moved with more certainty now, following some invisible trail toward the heart of the distortion. And as we got closer, the temporal effects intensified. We started seeing double, triple, multiple versions of the same jungle overlapping, walking through a tree from one timeline while simultaneously walking around the same tree in another timeline. It was disorienting, nauseating, like being drunk and sober at the same time, like existing in several states of reality simultaneously. Then we heard it, a sound that didn't belong in any time period, a deep thrumming, mechanical but organic, like a heartbeat made of machinery, like an engine that was also alive. It pulsed through the ground, through the air, through our bodies, a rhythm that made your bones vibrate and your teeth ache. The center, not whispered. We are close. The jungle opened up ahead of us into a clearing, but calling it a clearing doesn't capture what it was. It was a wound in reality, a space where the normal rules of physics had given up entirely. The ground wasn't ground. It was layers of ground, dirt from different eras stacked on top of each other, visible simultaneously like transparent sheets. The sky wasn't sky. It was multiple skies overlapping, day and night and dusk and dawn all happening at once. And in the center, there was a structure. No, structures. Multiple structures occupying the same space. A temple. Ancient, covered in moss and vines, architecture that predated anything in recorded history. But also a bunker. Concrete and steel, military construction from the Cold War era. But also something else. Something that hurt to look at. Geometry that didn't make sense. Angles that shouldn't exist. Materials that had no name. All three structures existing simultaneously in the same location, phasing in and out of dominance like they were competing for which reality got to be real. What the fuck is that? Webb breathed. The source, Chin said. The origin point of the temporal distortion. Something happened here. Something that broke time itself. We approached carefully. The closer we got, the worse the temporal effects became. I could see multiple versions of my team. Webb as he was now, but also Webb as he'd been as a child, but also Webb as an old man, all walking side by side. All real. All existing. My own hands looked different each time I looked at them. Young, old, scarred in different ways, wearing different rings, no rings, marked with tattoos I'd never gotten. The thrumming sound grew louder. It was coming from inside the structures. From the temple/bunker/impossible thing that was all three at once. And there were others here. We weren't alone. Soldiers from different eras stood around the perimeter of the clearing, staring at the structures. Some were from World War II, some from our Vietnam era, some from the future, wearing uniforms and carrying equipment I didn't recognize. All trapped here, all drawn to this spot, all unable to leave or enter or escape. One of them, an American lieutenant from the 1940s by his uniform, noticed us approaching. "Turn back," he called out. "Don't get closer. The closer you get, the more stuck you become. I've been here 3 days, or 30 years, or 3 minutes. Time doesn't mean anything anymore. I can see my whole life at once, birth and death and every moment between. It's maddening. How do we get out?" I asked him. He laughed, a hollow, broken sound. "You don't. No one does. Men come here, drawn by the anomaly or by bad luck or by orders they can't refuse. and they stay. Forever. Watching themselves live and die in infinite variations. Some men go mad within hours. Some last longer. But everyone breaks eventually. Time is supposed to flow forward. We're not built to experience it all at once. There has to be a way, Doc insisted. Some kind of center. Something causing this. If we can find it, shut it down, maybe time normalizes. The lieutenant shook his head. There's something in there. He pointed at the temple/bunker structure. Inside all three versions. Or maybe it's the same thing existing in 3 times. We've seen it. Shadows of it. Moving through the walls. Massive. Ancient. Wrong. Men who've gone inside don't come out. Or they come out different. Changed. No longer completely human. Time has gotten into them, infected them. They become part of the distortion. As if responding to his words, something moved inside the structures. All 3 versions simultaneously. A shadow. But not a shadow cast by light. A shadow cast by time itself. The absence of normal causality. It was huge, whatever it was. Moved with purpose. And it was aware of us. I could feel its attention, vast and alien and utterly indifferent to human suffering. We were insects to it. Bacteria. Less than nothing. It guards this place, Hut said quietly. The spirit at the heart of broken time. My grandfather's grandfather saw it once. Went mad from the sight. Drew pictures of it for years before he died. Circles within circles. Serpents eating their own tails. Flocks with no hands. Time made manifest. It's not a spirit, Chin said, but his voice was shaky. It's some kind of temporal entity. A being that exists outside normal time. Maybe it caused the distortion. Maybe the distortion created it. Chicken and egg. Cause and effect are meaningless here. The shadow moved again. Closer to the edge of the structure. We could almost see its shape now. Almost perceive what it was. And it was wrong. So fundamentally wrong that my brain refused to fully process it. I'd catch glimpses. Appendages that existed in multiple times at once. A body that was young and old and dead and unborn simultaneously. Eyes that saw past and future and present all at the same moment. A mouth that spoke words I'd hear yesterday and tomorrow and never. Then it spoke. Not with sound. With time itself. I experienced its communication as memories that hadn't happened yet. As future moments that felt like the distant past. The message was clear even though it made no linguistic sense. You should not have come here. This place is not for beings that experience time linearly. Your kind cannot comprehend. Cannot survive. Cannot leave. You are already trapped. Have always been trapped. Will always be trapped. Past tense, present tense, future tense all meaningless in my domain. The soldiers around the clearing were all experiencing the same communication. Some collapsed. Some screamed. One man, a future soldier in advanced combat gear, simply ceased to exist. Not died. Not moved. Just stopped being. Like time had decided he'd never been born. Like reality edited him out of history. We need to fight it, I said, though I had no idea how you fight something that exists outside time. Or negotiate with it. Or something. We can't just stand here and let it trap us forever. How do you fight time? Webb asked desperately. How do you shoot causality? How do you kill something that might not have been born yet? Source spoke up, his voice steady despite the madness around us. Fire, he said simply. Fire is change. Fire is transformation. It consumes past and creates future. It is the only force that moves in one direction. We burn the structures. All 3 versions. Force the entity to exist in a single timeline. Make it choose when it exists. Then maybe we can hurt it. Or escape while it's distracted. It was insane. But insanity was relative in a place where time didn't work. And we had white phosphorus grenades. Thermite charges. Enough incendiary weapons to burn down a significant chunk of jungle. If we set fire to the temple/bunker structure, if we created a temporal anchor point using the one-directional force of combustion, maybe we could force reality to stabilize. Or maybe we'd just burn to death in multiple time frames at once. Do it, I decided. Webb, Chun, set charges on all 3 versions of the structure. Doc, cover them. Not, Xor, find us an exit route. Somewhere that feels less temporally fucked than here. We set the charges, run, and hope the explosion creates enough chaos to let us slip out of the distortion zone. Everyone moved. Training taking over. Do the mission. Complete the objective. Don't think about the impossibility. Just execute. Webb and Chen approached the structures, carrying thermite charges and white phosphorus grenades. The closer they got, the more they began to phase, their bodies flickering between solid and translucent, between young and old, between alive and dead. But they pushed through, placed the charges on walls that might not exist, might have been destroyed centuries ago, might not be built for decades. The temporal entity sensed what we were doing. The shadow inside the structures grew agitated, moved faster. Multiple appendages extending from multiple time frames, reaching for our team members. Webb screamed as something touched him. His arm aged 50 years in 2 seconds. Skin wrinkling, muscles atrophying, bones becoming brittle. But he didn't stop. Placed the last charge and backed away, cradling his suddenly elderly arm. Charges set. Chen shouted. 30-second fuse. We ran. All of us. The other soldiers trapped around the clearing ran too. Everyone instinctively fleeing the coming explosion. Not led us toward what he felt was the weakest point in the temporal distortion. A direction that felt less wrong than others. We crashed through jungle that phased and shifted and changed with every step. Behind us, the charges detonated. Multiple explosions. Or maybe one explosion happening in 3 different times. The sound was wrong. Too loud and too quiet simultaneously. The light was impossible. Bright enough to burn retinas and dark enough to be invisible. And the fire. God, the fire. It burned in ways fire shouldn't. Consumed not just material but time itself. Eating past and future and present all at once. The explosion tore through reality itself. I felt it as much as heard it. A shockwave that traveled not through air but through time. Past versions of myself felt it. Future versions felt it. Every moment of my existence suddenly experienced the same explosion simultaneously. I was a child feeling it. An old man feeling it. Dead and feeling it from beyond. All at once. All real. All impossible. The jungle around us began to stabilize. Or maybe destabilize. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. Trees that had been overlapping separated into single versions. The sky chose a time to be, settling on dusk or dawn, or something in between. The multiple realities were collapsing, forced by the fire to choose which timeline they belonged to. Xor's theory was working. Fire was forcing causality, making time move in one direction again. But the entity wasn't accepting this. It screamed, not with sound but with temporal distortion. I felt my life flash before my eyes, but not like the saying. I actually experienced my entire life in that moment. Birth, childhood, first kiss, joining the army, every firefight, this mission, my death that hadn't happened yet but was happening now, decades beyond that into old age I'd never reach. All of it compressed into a single instant that lasted forever and no time at all. The other soldiers running with us were experiencing it too. Men falling to their knees, overwhelmed by seeing their entire existence at once. Some were laughing. Some were crying. Some were catatonic, minds broken by comprehending the totality of their lives. The Montagnards seemed less affected. Maybe their culture, their spiritual beliefs, had prepared them for this in ways Western minds couldn't handle. Nott kept running, kept leading us, even as tears streamed down his face. Behind us, the temple/bunker structures were burning in all three timeframes simultaneously. Ancient stone blackening and cracking, modern concrete exploding from heat stress. The impossible future structure doing things that had no name as fire consumed materials that shouldn't exist. And in the flames, the entity thrashed. We could see it now, fully visible, rendered solid by the fire's transformative force. It was enormous, serpentine, coiled around itself in ways that violated geometry. Its body was made of clock faces and calendar pages and hourglass sand all merged into living flesh. Eyes that were solar eclipses and meteor strikes and the birth and death of stars. A mouth that was a black hole and a white hole and every moment between creation and entropy. It was time itself given malevolent consciousness. Or maybe it wasn't malevolent. Maybe it was just incomprehensible. Maybe from its perspective, we were the anomaly. Linear beings in a universe where time was supposed to flow in all directions. We were the infection it was trying to contain, to neutralize, to trap in this zone where our limited temporal perception couldn't spread. "Don't look at it," Doc screamed, grabbing soldiers who'd stopped to stare. "Keep moving. The more you perceive it, the more it perceives you. Don't give it a lock on your timeline." We ran harder. The jungle was normalizing rapidly now. The fire was spreading, consuming the temporal distortion along with the physical vegetation. Everywhere the flames touched, reality solidified. Chose a single state. The overlapping time frames separated, diverged, became mutually exclusive again. It was working. We were escaping the distortion zone. I could feel it. The wrongness was fading. Time was beginning to flow forward again. 1 second after another. Linear. Sequential. Normal. But the entity wouldn't let us go easily. It reached across time for us. I saw its appendages extending from the burning structures, stretching through moments, grasping for our past selves, our future selves, our present selves. One soldier, the World War II lieutenant who'd warned us, got caught. An appendage wrapped around him, and suddenly he existed in every moment of his life simultaneously. Infant, child, teenager, young soldier, middle-aged, elderly, corpse, all superimposed in the same space. He opened his mouth to scream, but the sound came out at all his ages at once. A baby's cry and an old man's death rattle and everything between. Then he collapsed into himself. All his ages averaging out into a middle point, a single moment that represented the median of his entire existence. He was 35 years old when he stabilized. But wrong. Broken. His eyes showed every age he'd been. His voice spoke with the tone of every year of his life overlapping. "Keep running," I shouted. "Don't stop for anything." We broke through the tree line into an area that felt right. Normal. The air tasted like regular Cambodian jungle. Hot, humid, filled with the buzz of ordinary insects. The stars overhead were in their proper positions. Orion, the Big Dipper, constellations I recognized. We'd made it out. Escaped the temporal distortion zone. Behind us, the fire was visible through the trees. Growing, spreading, consuming the anomaly. And somewhere in those flames, the entity was trapped, forced into a single timeline by the unidirectional nature of combustion. Maybe killing it, maybe just imprisoning it, maybe just making it very angry. We didn't stop running until we'd put 3 kilometers between us and the fire. Finally collapsed in a small clearing, gasping, our bodies exhausted from more than physical exertion. Experiencing your entire life at once takes a toll. Your brain wasn't designed for that kind of temporal awareness. Every neuron firing with memories that hadn't happened yet and experiences that were decades past. Several of the soldiers we'd escaped with were unconscious. Others were muttering to themselves, trying to process what they'd experienced. One man, a future soldier with equipment from maybe the year 2000, was speaking urgently into a radio that wouldn't be invented for decades. calling for extraction to bases that didn't exist yet. His mind couldn't reconcile when he was. Head count, I ordered, trying to impose structure, routine, normalcy. Who made it out? My team was intact. All 6 of us. Not Xor, Doc, Webb, Chen, and myself. Battered, traumatized, but alive. Webb's arm was still elderly, the skin wrinkled and spotted, hanging loose on atrophied muscle. But the aging had stopped when we left the zone. He could still move it, still use it, even if it looked like it belonged to a man 50 years older. Besides us, 17 other soldiers had escaped. 3 from World War II, 5 from Korea, 6 from our Vietnam era but different units, and 3 from the future, the 2000s by their gear. They looked at us with the same confusion we felt looking at them. Men from different wars, different decades, different futures, all trapped together by an anomaly that shouldn't exist. What do we do with them? Chin asked quietly. We can't just leave them, but we can't exactly bring them back to base either. How do we explain soldiers from 1943 and 2003 showing up in Cambodia in 1970? It was a good question. A question I didn't have an answer for. The World War II soldiers couldn't go back to their time. That war was over. Their units disbanded. Their world moved on. The Korean War soldiers faced the same problem. And the future soldiers, they were from a time that hadn't happened yet. From their perspective, they'd been deployed to Cambodia in the early 2000s, long after the Vietnam War ended. They had knowledge of future events, future technology, future politics. They were temporal contamination, living paradoxes. One of the future soldiers, a sergeant with a name tape that read Martinez, spoke up. We need to report this. Whatever that thing was, whatever caused the temporal distortion, it's still there. Wounded maybe, contained by the fire, but not destroyed. In my time, in the early 2000s, there were classified reports about temporal anomaly zones. Places where time didn't work right. This was one of them. Still active 30 years after your war ended. Still trapping people. Still growing. Growing? Doc asked sharply. What do you mean growing? Martinez nodded grimly. The zone expands. Slowly. A few meters per year. But steady. By my time, it covered almost 50 square kilometers. The Cambodian government declared it a forbidden zone. The UN sent research teams. None came back. Or they came back wrong. Changed. Like that lieutenant who got caught. Existing in multiple times at once. Driven mad by temporal awareness. If it's growing, it needs to be stopped, I said. Contained. Destroyed. Whatever it takes. You can't destroy time, one of the World War II soldiers said. His name was Patterson, a corporal with the Flying Tigers. We tried. That's what the base you saw was doing. Research. We discovered the anomaly in 1943. Tried to study it. Weaponize it. Imagine being able to send soldiers backward or forward in time. Win battles before they started. Prevent defeats by changing history. But every attempt made it worse. Made the distortion stronger. The more we interfered, the more time broke down. That's why they abandoned the base. Sealed it. Tried to contain the anomaly by leaving it alone. But it didn't work, Chin said. The zone kept growing. Kept trapping people. Patterson nodded. Time wants to flow forward. When you create a place where it doesn't, where past and future and present all exist simultaneously, time itself fights back. Tries to correct the anomaly. And the method of correction is to trap anything that enters. Isolate the infection. Keep the temporal contamination contained. That entity you saw, I don't think it caused the anomaly. I think it's time's immune system. A response to the break. A guard dog keeping temporal paradoxes locked away. It made a horrifying kind of sense. The entity wasn't attacking us out of malice. It was quarantining us. preventing temporal contamination from spreading. We'd entered a zone where time was broken, and time's natural defense mechanism was to ensure we never left, to trap us there forever, isolated from the normal flow of causality. The fire had disrupted that process, forced the entity to choose a single timeline, which broke its grip on us. But it was temporary. Once the fire burned out, once the temporal anchor of combustion ceased, the zone would restabilize. The entity would recover, and it would be even more determined to contain the anomaly. "We need to report this to command," I said. "Get scientists, experts, figure out a permanent solution." "They won't believe you," Martinez said flatly. "I know. In my time, soldiers reported temporal anomalies all the time. Got psychiatric evaluations. Discharged for PTSD. The brass doesn't want to acknowledge that time can break. That there are places on Earth where causality fails. It threatens too many comfortable assumptions about reality." "Then we make them believe," Doc said. "We have witnesses. Multiple soldiers from multiple time periods. We have physical evidence." He gestured to Webb's elderly arm. "We have documentation." He pulled out his camera. "I got photos of the World War II base, of the structures, of the entity in the flames." We spent the next hour organizing our story, getting statements from the soldiers we'd escaped with, documenting everything we could remember, building a case that would be impossible to dismiss. 17 soldiers all telling the same story, from different eras, with physical evidence and photographic proof. It wasn't much, but it was something. As dawn broke, we heard helicopters. American Hueys, the beautiful sound of rescue. We'd managed to get our radio working again once we cleared the distortion zone. Called for emergency extraction. Told them we had casualties and disoriented personnel. Didn't mention the time travel or temporal entities or any of the impossible things we'd experienced. Just requested immediate evac for combat-related trauma. The helicopters landed in a nearby clearing. Door gunners scanned the tree line nervously, expecting enemy contact. The pilots looked confused when they saw our group. Counted heads, noted that we had way more personnel than we should. Saw the mixed uniforms, the equipment from different eras. One pilot, a warrant officer with 20 years of flight time, took one look at Patterson's World War II gear and went pale. "Sir," the pilot said quietly to me, "what the fuck is going on? Who are these men? Where did they come from?" "Long story," I said. "Extremely long, extremely classified story. We need transport to headquarters. All of us. And we need a security blackout on this extraction. No flight logs, no official record. Can you do that?" The pilot stared at me for a long moment. Looked at the mixed group of soldiers from different wars. Looked at Webb's elderly arm. Looked at the glow on the horizon where the fire was still burning. Then he nodded slowly. "I've been flying in Cambodia long enough to know there are things out here that don't make the official reports. Things that shouldn't exist but do anyway. I won't ask questions. I'll get you to headquarters. What happens after that is above my pay grade." We loaded onto the helicopters. The 17 escaped soldiers, my team, all of us crammed into choppers designed for fewer people. As we lifted off, I looked back at the jungle. The fire was still visible, a column of smoke rising into the morning sky. And at its base, something moved. Something massive and serpentine and made of time itself. The entity wasn't dead. Wasn't even seriously injured. Just temporarily inconvenienced. It would recover. Would resume its function as time's immune system. Would keep the anomaly contained. Would trap anyone foolish enough to enter the distortion zone. The flight back to base was silent. Nobody talked. Nobody could process what we'd experienced. Seeing your entire life at once does something to you. Changes your perspective. Makes the present moment seem less important. Makes future fears less scary. Makes past regrets less painful. Because you've already lived it all. already experienced birth and death and every second between. The weight of that knowledge was crushing. At headquarters, we were separated immediately. Each soldier taken to different debriefing rooms, isolated so our stories couldn't influence each other. Standard procedure for trauma evaluation, but also smart if command suspected we were lying or had been compromised. They wanted independent accounts before deciding if we were telling the truth or having a mass psychotic break. My debriefing lasted 18 hours. 2 colonels and 3 civilians who wouldn't identify themselves. They asked questions. Very specific questions. Questions that made it clear they knew more about temporal anomalies than they were admitting. They showed me photographs of other sites, other locations around the world where similar distortions had been reported. Cambodia was one of at least 12 known zones. There were probably others that hadn't been discovered yet. Places where time broke down, where past and future bled into present, where entities that existed outside normal causality guarded the boundaries. How long has the military known about this? I asked after hours of questioning. One of the civilians, a woman in her 50s with eyes that had seen too much, answered. Since 1943. Since the Philadelphia experiment, though that's not what it was really about. We've known that time isn't as stable as we teach in schools. That there are weak points, thin places where causality breaks down. We've studied them, tried to weaponize them, failed every time. The best we can do is contain them, mark them as forbidden zones, keep people away, and occasionally extract survivors when operations go wrong. What about the soldiers we brought back? I asked. The men from other time periods? Her expression hardened. They can't go back to their times, can't be reintegrated into society. They know too much. They've experienced too much. They're temporal contamination, living paradoxes. We have a facility in Nevada where we keep them, other survivors from other anomaly zones. It's not a prison. It's more like a town. A place where people who've experienced non-linear time can exist without driving the rest of the world insane with what they know. You're going to lock them up? I said, anger rising. They're soldiers. American soldiers. They serve their country, and their country will take care of them, she said firmly. But they can't go home. The World War II soldiers? Their families think they died in 1943. The Korean War soldiers? Same thing. Dead or missing, presumed Kia. We can't suddenly resurrect them decades later without questions we can't answer. And the future soldiers, the 2000s personnel? They don't exist yet. Won't be born for years. If we let them into the general population, they become walking paradoxes. Everything they know about the future could change history, create branching timelines, cascade effects we can't predict. What about my team? I demanded. Are you locking us up too? No, she said. You're from the right time period. You can be debriefed, classified, monitored. You'll continue your service with SOG, but you'll never speak about this mission to anyone, ever. It's buried above top secret. If you talk, you disappear, not killed. Just relocated to that same facility in Nevada. Spend the rest of your life with the other temporal refugees. I was released 3 days later. Returned to my unit. My team was there, all of us looking haunted but alive. Webb's arm was still elderly. The doctors couldn't explain it, couldn't reverse it. He learned to live with it. Got pretty good at hiding it under long sleeves. Eventually took a medical discharge when the questions became too difficult to deflect. Chen became obsessed with temporal physics. Spent his off-duty hours reading everything he could find about time, causality, quantum mechanics. Got out of the army after his tour, went to graduate school, became a physicist. Published papers on theoretical temporal mechanics. Nobody took him seriously. Nobody except a few classified programs that recruited him for research into the anomaly zones. Doc stayed in SOG, finished his tour, went home, died in a car accident in 1973. But at his funeral, I swear I saw him in the crowd, older, from a timeline where he'd survived that accident. Or maybe I was just seeing ghosts. When you've experienced non-linear time, you can never be sure what's real and what's temporal echo. Nut and Xor continued working with SOG until the war ended. The mountain yards were abandoned by America when Saigon fell. Their people persecuted by the victorious North Vietnamese. Last I heard, Nut made it to a refugee camp in Thailand. Xor disappeared. Probably dead. Probably. But sometimes I wonder if he walked back into that jungle, back into the anomaly zone. The mountain yards had folklore about those places. Maybe they knew how to navigate them. Maybe he's still there, walking between times, existing in moments past and future and present all at once. As for me, I finished my tour, came home, got married, had kids, built a normal life. But I never forgot, never stopped thinking about that place, that zone where time broke down, that entity made of causality itself. And I never stopped wondering what would happen if the anomaly kept growing, if the distortion zone expanded beyond containment, if one day the temporal infection spread across the entire world. I'm 75 years old now, writing this in 2022. The Cambodia anomaly zone is still there, still growing. According to classified reports I shouldn't have access to but do, it now covers over 300 square kilometers. The Cambodian government has declared the entire region forbidden. The UN has researchers monitoring it, and soldiers still go missing in that jungle. Modern soldiers with drones and satellites and technology we couldn't dream of in 1970. Technology doesn't matter. Time doesn't care about your gear. I've experienced my entire life, seen my death, know when it comes and how. That knowledge should terrify me, should make every day feel like counting down to an execution. But it doesn't, because I also know that time isn't linear. That somewhere, in some timeline, in some layer of reality, I'm still in that jungle, still 25 years old, still running from an entity made of causality. And I always will be, forever trapped in that moment, forever escaping, forever caught, all at once, all real, all impossible. The anomaly zones are spreading, all 12 of them, and maybe more that haven't been discovered. Slowly, inexorably, time is breaking down across the planet. The entities that guard these zones, time's immune system, they're fighting back, trying to contain the infection, but they're losing. The zones grow, the distortions expand, and one day, maybe soon, maybe in 100 years, maybe yesterday, the zones will overlap, will merge, will create a planetary temporal anomaly, and humanity will experience what I experienced in that jungle. We'll see all of time at once, past, present, future, all simultaneous, all real, all overwhelming. I don't know if we'll survive it. Don't know if consciousness can exist in a non-linear temporal state on a species-wide scale. Maybe we'll transcend, become beings of pure temporal awareness. Maybe we'll go mad. Maybe we'll cease to exist. Maybe all three at once. But I know this, time is not your friend. It's not stable. It's not safe. There are places in this world where it breaks down, where cause and effect become meaningless, where entities guard the boundaries between linear and non-linear causality. And every year, those places grow. Every year, more soldiers go missing. Every year, the infection spreads. If you ever find yourself in Cambodia, stay away from the forbidden zones. Stay away from the jungle regions marked on no official maps. And if you ever feel time start to slip, if you ever experience moments out of sequence, if you ever see multiple versions of yourself overlapping, run. Run as fast as you can toward normalcy, toward linear causality, toward the simple progression of seconds into minutes, into hours, into days. Because once you've seen time as it really is, Once you've experienced all your moments simultaneously, you can never unsee it. You carry that knowledge forever, across every timeline, through every version of yourself. And it changes you, breaks you, makes you something more and less than human all at once. RT Python officially never existed. Our mission never happened. The Cambodia anomaly zone is classified above top secret. And the 17 soldiers we brought back? They're still in that facility in Nevada, living in a town that exists outside time, waiting, always waiting, for the day when the anomaly zones merge and all of humanity joins them in temporal exile. I'll be dead soon. This version of me anyway. But I know that somewhere, in some timeline, I'm still alive, still young, still running. And I know that somewhere else, I'm not born yet, still waiting to exist. And all those versions, all those MES, they're all real, all happening, all now. Time isn't a river flowing forward. It's an ocean. We're drowning in it. And we don't even know. Stay out of the jungle. Stay away from the zones. And if you ever meet someone who's seen their whole life at once, someone who speaks about time in ways that make no sense, someone who seems to exist in multiple moments simultaneously, be kind to them. They're survivors of a war that hasn't been fought yet, of a casualty that's always happening, of a truth that most people will never have to face. Time is breaking, the zones are spreading, and one day, maybe soon, we'll all experience what I experienced in that Cambodian jungle. God help us all.